Hello, and welcome to Setting the Standard, brought to you by the Wireless Innovation Forum. I'm your host and Communications Director of the Forum, Stephanie Hamill. Today, I'm talking with Forum President and Chair, John Glossner, and our Chief Technical Officer, Andy Clegg. John is the CEO of Optimum Semiconductor Technologies and President of the Heterogeneous System Architecture Foundation. Andy is the Spectrum Engineering Lead for Google and was previously Program Director for Spectrum Management at the U.S. National Science Foundation. Both are involved in the Forum's Advanced Technologies Committee, which heads the Forum's decade-old Top 10 Most Wanted Wireless Innovations project, which often serves as the seed of many Forum projects.
Hi, thank you for joining me today, gentlemen, to talk about the Top 10 Wireless Innovations. John, can you start off by telling us a bit about the history of the Top 10 and your involvement?
Sure. So we started around 2010 looking at different scenarios and innovations that would be required in next generation wireless devices. And from that, we put together input from a number of different stakeholders. And it included the whole range, everything from users to radio manufacturers to hardware and software component providers, as well as operators and even spectrum regulators. And when we sat and thought about doing this, we didn't want this to just be a kind of technical innovation, but we also wanted it to include things like business innovations and regulatory innovations. And so from that basis, we started out to solicit input from all of these different stakeholders, and that grew into what is now our top 10 most wanted innovations list.
Okay, great. And Andy, from an industry's perspective, how do you feel this is important?
Yeah, so the cool thing about the top 10 list is that these are innovations that we think are key to making dramatic improvements in spectrum utilization and other wireless innovations, which is what the Wind Forum is all about. So we use these top 10 lists to sort of connect us with the researchers who are actually the ones that would develop these next generation things from academia or from industry. And it's really the things that'll move us to the next step in wireless innovation. So we're pretty excited about those. And if you don't mind, I can actually even read some of the innovations that we have on our current list, so people know what kind of innovations we're looking at, although we're always open for more, which we'll talk about shortly. So in our current list here in 2020, we've got top 10 innovation list that reads number 1, artificial intelligence and machine learning for radios, very hot topic. Number 2, dynamic spectrum management. That covers a lot of what we're doing in Wind Forum and ways to improve dynamic spectrum management and dynamic spectrum access. Number 3, my favorite, propagation prediction techniques for dynamic spectrum sharing, because propagation is key to spectrum utilization, it turns out, and we're using models right now that are decades old. So, moving to next generation propagation prediction is exciting. Innovation number 4, flexible, extensible, and secure transportation communication framework, architecture and management, so to support intelligent transportation and autonomous vehicles and things like that. Advanced interference mitigation techniques, so how can we deal with interference when it occurs? Receiver performance interference thresholds. People argue that it's not really transmitters that take up bandwidth, it's receivers, because if they have poor filtering or whatever, you can cause a receiver to respond to signals that it shouldn't be. And so how do we improve that? Low cost, wide spectral range RF front end. So if you want to configure radios to operate over all frequency bands or a very large range of frequency bands, you need all sorts of adaptability. We don't really have that today, at least in any way that is commercially deployable. So we'd like to see innovations there. Efficient techniques to minimize power amplifier spectral regrowth in non-contiguous spectral environments. So basically, we're limited to an extent with transmitters transmitting and their power amplifiers consuming more spectrum than is necessary. Network management of mobile ad hoc networks, another innovation that we're looking to see significant developments in. And then integrated development and debug environment to create portable software-based applications on embedded heterogeneous platforms. So of course, this is in the support of autonomous reconfigurable radios and things. So those are the top 10 innovations we have today, but we're always looking for new ones as the industry develops, and hopefully we get some of these innovations, we make substantial headway on, and we can sort of graduate them from the top 10 innovation list because we're actually using them, and we can replace them with new innovations coming down the pike.
Great, thanks. And speaking of that, John, what are some of the past innovations that have graduated on that the forum has helped play a role in solving?
So interestingly, if you look back to the original list, some of the current wanted innovations were on that original list and partially solved, and in some cases fully solved. One good example is low power general purpose processors were on the original list, and some software defined radio like techniques running on those, and that is pretty much a solved problem now. Heterogeneous platforms has been reduced really to just looking for kind of common debug tools, but now there do exist tool chains that will produce both GPU and CPU code. And then one kind of interesting one is it made the list, and it continues because there's still more work to be done. But we had a innovation for flexible regulatory framework for temporary, cooperative, or opportunistic access. So this is actually, I think, a very good news story from the forum's point of view, because we set up a whole committee, the Spectrum Sharing Committee, to work on aspects of this. It ultimately led to the specifications for CBRS, and most recently with the FCC licensing of CBRS spectrum, it's enabling an entire new industry. So I think that is one where we very specifically targeted specific actions inside of work groups, which then became a committee and led to a whole set of specifications for this new industry.
That's really exciting. So Andy, looking at the future, what's next, and how do we get people to get involved?
Yeah, so starting this year, we're doing things a little bit differently, and we're actually providing for broader-based input to the top 10 process. So you can go to our website, and we will be, there is an option there to provide input to the top 10, but we're also creating a poll, which we will publicize both inside and outside the forum. So anybody can go and submit ideas for top 10, and then we will solicit the public to provide input on which they think are the key items. And so if we have a list of 20 or 30 potential top 10 innovations, we'll allow the public to vote on the ones that they like the most, and we'll take the top 10 of those, and that will become next year's top 10 innovation list. And we then publicize that obviously on our website, but we target it at the R&D community, we target it at the academic community, we target at the people who will actually be able to make progress on the research that goes into to making headway on these top 10 innovations.
Great. Well, thanks for joining me today, and stay tuned for more of this on the top 10 and hopefully going over each new innovation that comes in.
Thanks, Stephanie.
All right, thanks guys.
Thanks to be with you.
Thanks for watching and listening, everyone. Be sure to subscribe to be notified when the forum posts a new episode of Setting the Standard. And head on over to www.wirelessinnovation.org to join our mail list, follow us on social media, and more. Talk to you soon.